Deputy Timmins, Creighton and Terence Flanagan.
Last Concordia, I'm raising this on behalf of also on behalf of my colleagues and on my own name. Basically, it relates there, Minister, to decisions made regarding office accommodation. And as you know, the existing practice is that the Government Chief Whip makes the decisions as to where various all members of the House, actually the accommodation as to where they're based. And our amendment is effectively saying that we need to depoliticise the current situation. We need to take that decision-making away from a Government Chief Whip and give that power to the Secretary-General of the Houses of the Oireachtas. The current system, as you know, Minister, is most unfair, it's most undemocratic as well. I mean, the Government Chief Whip can and does act in a partisan manner at times, and there can be, I suppose, decisions made where people are removed forcibly from their office. And I know Deputy Matthews will speak further on that, because he directly experienced the removing of his papers, which was completely out of order, the way that whole issue was dealt with at the time. And effectively what we're saying in Renua Ireland is that the government of the day and the governing party, and particularly the Government Chief Whip, should have no entitlement in relation to managing and assigning office accommodation, that they shouldn't be disrupting the members who have been duly elected by all the people to serve the people, and everyone works extremely hard, as you know, Minister, in this House. So what we want to do is really depoliticise the distribution of office space, ensure that all members of the Oireachtas, each one who has an equal mandate and a constitutional mandate, and that there's full equality in relation to all these matters. And sadly, I suppose to say that this issue does form part of a wider narrative there when it comes to the government and diminishing political opponents. We do have the whole issue, I suppose, about speaking time and speaking rights. And those who aren't members of the main opposition parties, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael or the technical group, are actually treated very poorly when it comes to the others and the speaking slots. So we don't have, I suppose, the same equal opportunity to put our points across, and we're all members, we're meant to be all treated equally, and we all have the same mandate. So we're all trying to put across our various points. So that's another unfairness that we see in the current system. The other one also relates to the parliamentary allowances, and I know we had that full discussion, Minister, down at in the committee rooms about the taking of monies by political parties when members are no longer part of that political party. And in Renew Ireland, we want to see that on a yearly basis, if you're not a member of a political party at the end of a calendar year, that party would not be able to actually draw down that money. So basically that taxpayers' money is no longer going to fund other parties, particularly where members are former members, they're no longer part of that political party. So we just want to see, I suppose, amendment, see fairness in relation to this whole area, to see the whole issue of the Chief Whip not being able to make these decisions, to see it be politicised, that the Secretary-General of the Houses of the Oireachtas, that's where that power should actually lie. It should be taken from government and the Government Chief Whip.
Deputy Matthews.
Thank you, Caoirleach. I think that this amendment is a good safeguard for fairness and for equality as members of a parliament. We've been elected as members of a parliament. Parties haven't been elected as members of parliament. They are, as it were, the umbrella or the playing colours of the individuals who have been elected to parliament. In my own experience, I think it's sometimes good to see what has happened in reality in order to diagnose a problem or to explore a fairness and a possibility for better conduct in the future. And it's not by way of sort of trying to examine scar tissue for the sake of examining scar tissue. It's to see, is there a better way of doing things? On the 2nd of July 2013, there was a vote in this House, and the government chief whip directed members of the government parties to vote in a certain way. And it was an extraordinary or an exceptional piece of legislation. And in any other country, members of parliament would have been given the democratic right as representatives to vote in accordance with conscience. That wasn't applied on this occasion, and therefore voting in accordance with conscience, and it was not a personal conscience, it was a conscience within the ambit of being a representative of the whole people, as the German Basic Law describes in its constitution, as does, by the way, the principles of the Lithuanian, the Czech Republic, and the Latvian and the Netherlands constitutions. But we were prevented from behaviour within those democratic principles. And the outcome of not voting by the direction of the government whip was immediate expulsion from the parliamentary party. Immediate. Handed the letter. And then, following that, that was on the 2nd of July, and the reason why I'm giving the chronology on this is, the House was going to rise within a fortnight, just as we're going to rise next Thursday on the 16th. But the direction to get out of the offices and just do as the chief government whip did, by way of almost a reprisal for voting in accordance with conscience, was well over the top. So this type of amendment is going to prevent that going over the top for a reprisal act. Now, the next thing is, here's the facts. It was enough pressure leading up to the decision to vote in accordance to conscience. And my health wasn't great at the time. And I'm not just for prurient reasons revealing this, but it's important because it happened. I visited my doctor, my physician, and my blood pressure was extremely high. And I told him that there was a direction to get out of the offices, and he said, well, it's not appropriate. The summer holidays and recess are coming up, and it would be the reasonable and courteous thing to do by arrangement, consensually, cordially, to vacate. There was no emergency to do it. I had a medical certificate that recorded that my blood pressure was elevated, and it was not indicated to do it. And this certificate was presented to the office of the Taoiseach, as well as to the chief whip. It didn't have any effect at all. And what happened was, a week following, all my communication lines of phones and emails, computers, were cut. It was like before the Normandy landings. So I had no, but then they were restored. And for a week, we limped on in the office. But then the following weekend, without my knowledge, everything was removed, including the pictures on the wall. All my papers, all my files, everything. And removed from the 5-storey building down to Leinster House 2000, to the basement, which, I pointed out at the time actually, has an inbuilt fire hazard in it, because there are steel girders that are vertical, going down into the ground, that support a wire mesh that is impenetrable. And if the building went on fire on the corridors, there's no escape. And I pointed this out. Nothing has been done about that, but there we are. Now, these are facts. And these sort of facts, you see, if they were within the ambit and responsibility of, as proposed, the Secretary-General of the Houses of the Oireachtas, it would be a much better and safer and safeguarding framework. It would do, as Deputy Flanagan said, It would depoliticise the accommodation of duly elected members of Parliament who are solemnly doing their best to carry out their responsibilities. And I'm not playing around with, geographies or physics or psychologies here. I'm being dead honest. Dead honest. And I think no matter who belonged to what party or no party, sure, it's helpful for members who happen to be members of parties to be grouped in buildings within easy access of one another. I've no problem with that. But in exceptional circumstances, there should be, above all, courtesy and understanding. Respect. And there wasn't. And that happens when there is too much concentration of power and authority, no matter who the office holder happens to be. It's the framework is dangerous. And the framework of giving the allocation of office accommodation in a practicable sort of way, with the ultimate responsibility being assigned to a servant, a civil servant, not exposed to political pressures and temptations, is a good idea. It's a very good idea. And I'd ask, in fact, I'd entreat, and I'm doing so humbly, Minister, that this would be taken on board for the future. This is with an eye to the future. The same way as you have fire escapes in buildings. So if we look at the facts, at what happened, that could have been prevented. It could have been prevented. There was no need for it, but the temptation was there. Why? Because an act of insubordination in the minds of the whip and the government took place, and there was going to be a punishment for it. And that's wrong. It's as plain as the nose on my face that that is wrong in the circumstances. Anybody from any other jurisdiction speaking any other language would clearly understand that. And in the haste of the blizzard of trying to get stuff through legislatively, behaviours get heated. Judgment is missing. Courtesy goes out the door. And that's not a good idea. Should we even saw today, just on pressing a button, red or green, Deputy O'Quillan, in the haste of getting down to get to his thing, mistakenly hit the wrong button. When things are done too hastily, errors occur. Bank guarantees, liquidations of busted banks overnight, setting up of NAMA on half an hour's reading when the papers in the hands of the deputies in the last dole, the 30th dole, were still warm from the Xeroxing machine. Big thick documents, steady. No, this is important, but this is where it begins in things like the allocation of spaces. It begins there. The allocation of resources, of money, as Deputy Flanagan said, to carry out research in order to carry out your parliamentary functions. And suddenly it's whipped because without thinking. So you de-resource somebody who's been duly elected, a man or a woman, young or old. It's not right. Anybody, as I said, can see that it's not right. Utterly not right. So all I'd say is, please, I'll do whatever it takes in order to ask you to do the right thing. If you want me to do a cartwheel down the steps there, I'll do it. I'll genuflect you, because it's the right thing to do. This isn't about egos or power or numbers, and we'll vote you down anyway. Let's do the right thing because it's right. 166 of us here know, obviously, that it's the right thing to do. Why can't we try it once? Just once. And we might get behavior changing. Because if you keep doing the same things again and again, any psychiatrist will tell you, you're going to get the same results. Do you know what a psychiatrist says if he's worth his salt, or her salt, to his patients? Stop it. Stop doing what you're doing if you want a different result. But the results are not good. They're not. And we can change them by changing our behavior. So I'd entreat you, Minister, please, and I'm saying it really humbly, from experience, first-hand experience. Try it. It's worth it. Well worth it. Thank you.
Minister.
I thank the deputies for their contributions. This particular amendment is somewhat extraneous to the bill, which is about the appointment of the Clerk and Secretary General of the House. I make one general observation, then comment on the amendment. It's not the first time that I've listened to a speech like the one I've just heard, as if the deputy had within his heart the full knowledge of right, and anybody who had a different view is automatically wrong. I respect everybody's view, but I don't assume that somebody who disagrees with me, by virtue of that disagreement, is wrong. And that's a very odd position. I want to explain in relation to how accommodation, I listened very carefully.
Deputy, you'll have an opportunity to come back again.
I listened very carefully to everything the Deputy said. The Oireachtas Commission, under law, has a statutory function in preparing guidelines for members on the use of all accommodation in these houses. The Office of the Superintendent of the Houses supports the Commission in carrying out that statutory function. Those guidelines indicate that in the event of a difficulty or disagreement in relation to the enforcing of those guidelines, the matter will be decided upon by the Ceann Comhairle in his capacity as chairperson of the Oireachtas Commission. The guidelines are for the advantage of every member of the House, and the proposed amendment would, in my judgment, reduce the powers ultimately of the independently elected chair of Dáil Éireann to make decisions in the event of disagreements or disputes. My honest view of what is right is that that is a better way than giving it to any administrator who would actually be caught in a political controversy, as you've indicated. And I don't think that's a fair or reasonable place to put any administrator in this House.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy, do you want to come back? Do you want to come back in, Deputy?
Yeah.
You have 2 minutes.
Sorry, thank you, Comhairle. Minister, look, I know by definition, if there's a debate, there are 2 viewpoints, if not many more. But I'm just saying, if you paid attention to the events that took place, in the circumstances of how they took place, and what the outcomes were, and who had the power and authority to do what, and to do it suddenly, like a field marshal. I won't use another language phrase for it, but it is not good behaviour. I make the points. There was only 2 weeks to go. The circumstances showed that there could have been a gradual, courteous, consensual change of address within the Oireachtas. The facts were that punishment had to be seen to have been meted out. Now, if you think that the chairman of the Dáil, of the Oireachtas Commission, is somebody who likes to mete out punishments, well, then we're in an even stranger place than I thought. A civil servant can, given the protection of the responsibility of this, use that statutory responsibility to say, there must be order and cordiality here, please. I don't care what political parties or groupings have what power by dint of numbers. I'm going to make sure that there's civility civility here. It's like M. Scott Peck says in his book, A World Waiting to be Born, in search of civility. We're missing that. And maybe for the summer reading, that's a book worth reading. It's A World Waiting to be Born. For all organisations. We're an organisation here. We are the cardiovascular democratic system for the country.
You have to conclude now, your 2 minutes.
Yeah. No, but the connections are important, because if people don't understand the connections, then I'm not saying I have a monopoly in wisdom, I don't, but it's an understanding that I want to share. And I said, it's humble sharing. I'm not, if I give the impression that I see myself as having, the only and one and correct view, I'm not. I'm sharing an understanding. Like the way, when somebody said, oh, the body floats in water because the body's mass is lighter than the water's mass. That's why it floats. It's a discovery. That's all I'm saying. Please take it on board.
No, Deputy.
Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Flanagan.
Thanks,
You have 2
Laskin.
minutes, or when you want, as a move of the motion, you can speak a third time, if you wish.
Yeah, no, I'll just conclude. Probably.
Conclude. Well, you have unlimited
But just, I suppose, to thank the Minister for his response. But I suppose anybody impartial, anybody neutral who looks at the current situation would say it is very unfair. It's very undemocratic, actually, the way things are happening here in real time. And to have, I suppose, the governing parties of the day assigning office space and disrupting as well members. Like, we all have the same mandate, as you already agreed, Minister, that all members of this House should have the same entitlement when it comes to speaking rights in relation to office accommodation as well. And we did have a major disruption here with a member, with Deputy Peter Matthews, and the appalling way that he was actually treated with at the time. So we need to ensure that these type of situations don't happen again. Myself and my colleagues, Deputies Creighton and Timmins, were looking to depoliticise the current situation and ensure that this is done above politics, that it's made by an independent, by a neutral person, that being the Secretary-General of the Houses of the Oireachtas. And that's where the powers in relation to office accommodation, that's where that should lie, not with a government chief whip.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister, do you want to respond?
No, I've said all I need to say.
Okay. Well, then, I'll now put the question. Are you pressing the amendment? Yes. Amendment number 12. I'll put the question that the amendment be made. The Teachtaí atá here in the case operates Tá. The Teachtaí atá na Guinea operates Neil. Sheila will bull sharing case. In my opinion, the question is lost.